My name is Samantha, and when I was 9 years old, I lived in a quiet part of Springfield, Illinois, where the summer heat felt like a heavy blanket draped over your shoulders, and the cornfields just outside the city limits seemed to whisper in the wind. Back then, my world was small, but it was full of adventure because I had my older brother Jason and a huge undeveloped piece of land right at the end of our street. This land was our kingdom, and it was a massive stretch of dirt and weeds and wild bushes that the construction crews had ignored for years while they built the surrounding houses. For two kids with bicycles and too much free time, it was paradise, because it was filled with giant piles of dirt that served as the most perfect bike ramps you could ever imagine. We would spend hours racing our BMX bikes up those steep mounds and flying through the air feeling like we were invincible superheroes. I was a scrawny girl with knobby knees and pigtails that never stayed straight, but on my bike I felt like I was 10 feet tall. My brother Jason was 3 years older than me, and he was my best friend and protector, who always made sure my chain was greased and my tires were full of air. We lived for those afternoons in the dirt lot, where the only thing that mattered was who could jump the highest or go the fastest. But every kingdom has a monster, and ours was a girl named Megan who lived just 3 houses down from us. Megan was 12 years old, and she was the definition of a neighborhood nightmare. She was taller than most of the boys, and she had a mean streak that was wider than the Sangamon River. Megan did not just want to play in the dirt lot, she wanted to own it, and she wanted everyone else to feel miserable while she was there. She was aggressive and cruel, and she had this way of looking at you like you were a bug she was about to squish under her boot. Megan was never alone because she always had her 2 younger siblings trailing behind her like a little pack of wolves. They would follow her lead and do whatever she told them to do, which usually involved making our lives a living hell. She would call us names from the back of the school bus and yell insults that made my ears turn red with embarrassment. She would throw heavy rocks at us while we were trying to ride our bikes, and she would laugh when we had to dodge them to avoid getting hurt. Sometimes she would wait until we were at the very top of a dirt ramp, and then she would run out and push us off our bikes, sending us tumbling down the dusty slope into the thorn bushes. My knees were always covered in scrapes, and my elbows were constantly bruised because of her. We tried to stay away from her, but the dirt lot was the only place to play, and she seemed to have a sixth sense for whenever we were having fun. The situation kept getting worse as the summer went on, and Megan grew more bold. She started surrounding us with her siblings, and they would trap us in a circle while they threw handfuls of dirt and weeds at us. It was terrifying to be 9 years old and feel like you were being hunted in your own neighborhood. One afternoon, the humidity was so high you could practically swim through the air, and we were out at the lot trying to enjoy the new ramps the rain had washed out. Megan and her siblings appeared out of nowhere like they always did. They started hooting and hollering and picking up stones from the edge of the property. I tried to turn my bike around to leave, but Megan blocked my path. She had a jagged rock in her hand and a nasty smirk on her face. Before I could even say a word, she flung the rock with all her might. It hit me right in the corner of my left eye, and the pain was so sharp and sudden that I fell off my bike and hit the ground hard. My vision went blurry, and I could feel the hot sting of tears and blood welling up. I heard Megan and her siblings laughing as they ran away like it was the funniest thing in the world. Jason rushed over to help me, and he was shaking with anger, but I was the one who was truly done. As I sat there in the dirt clutching my face, I realized that being nice and staying out of her way was never going to work. Megan did not want peace, she wanted power, and I was tired of being her target. That night, while my mom put a cold compress on my swollen eye, I lay in bed and thought about how unfair the world was. I was just a kid who wanted to ride my bike, but I felt like I was living in a constant state of fear. I knew I couldn't beat Megan in a fair fight because she was bigger and stronger and had a meaner spirit, but I realized I didn't have to be stronger if I was smarter. I came up with a plan that was risky and a little bit scary, but it was the only way to take our kingdom back. The next morning, I pulled Jason aside and told him what we were going to do. At first, he was worried that we would get into trouble with our parents or that Megan would find out and beat us up even worse, but I showed him my black eye and told him that we couldn't keep living like this. He finally nodded and agreed to help me. That weekend, we waited until Megan and her family went to the grocery store so we would have a few hours of total privacy. We headed out to the dirt lot with a heavy-duty shovel and a rusted garden spade we had taken from the back of the garage. I picked a spot at the very base of one of the steepest hills, which was the main entrance point everyone used to get into the center of the lot. It was the perfect bottleneck, where you had to pass through to get to the best ramps. I told Jason we needed to dig a hole that was at least 4 feet deep. It was grueling work because the Illinois soil was thick and packed with clay. We spent hours under the blistering sun sweating and gasping for air as we hauled out bucket after bucket of heavy black dirt. My hands were soon covered in painful blisters and my back ached, but I didn't care. Every time I felt like quitting, I thought about the rock hitting my eye and the sound of Megan's laughter. We worked like a well-oiled machine, with Jason doing the heavy digging and me hauling the dirt away and hiding it behind a pile of old tires so no one would notice the fresh mounds. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we had a hole that was deep enough that a 12-year-old girl wouldn't be able to just step out of it. It was a narrow pit that looked like a dark mouth waiting in the earth. Now came the most important part, which was the camouflage. I had spent the previous hour collecting long dead grass and dry leaves and brown weeds from around the edges of the lot. I carefully laid a few sturdy but thin sticks across the top of the hole to act as a frame. Then I began to weave the grass and weeds over the sticks until the hole was completely covered. I added a layer of loose dust and some scattered leaves to make it look exactly like the other piles of debris that the heavy summer rainstorms would often pool together in the low spots of the lot. From a distance, and even from up close, it looked like solid ground covered in natural litter. It was a masterpiece of deception. We retreated to a safe distance and hid behind a large thicket of bushes to wait. We sat there for hours with the mosquitoes biting our ankles and the heat making us feel dizzy, but Megan never showed up that evening. We had to go home for dinner feeling frustrated and worried that our trap would be discovered by a stray dog or ruined by the wind. The next morning we were back at our post as soon as our parents let us outside. We checked the hole, and it was still perfectly hidden. We waited and waited, and the tension was making my stomach do flip-flops. I started to think that maybe she wouldn't come out today, or maybe she had moved on to bullying someone else. But then we heard it. The unmistakable sound of Megan's loud and obnoxious voice. She was walking toward the lot with her siblings, and she was carrying a bag of water balloons, which I knew she intended to use on us. She was stomping through the weeds with that arrogant stride of hers looking for a victim. She didn't see us because we were tucked deep into the bushes. She headed straight for the main ramp, which was exactly where we had dug the pit. She was talking to her brother about how she was going to soak us until we cried. She reached the base of the hill and took one giant confident step onto what she thought was a pile of dead grass. Time seemed to slow down for a second. The thin sticks snapped with a loud crack, and the camouflage gave way instantly. Megan didn't even have time to scream before she vanished. One moment she was standing there looking like the queen of the neighborhood, and the next she was gone with a muffled thud and a cloud of dust. Her siblings stopped dead in their tracks, their eyes wide with confusion and fear. They looked at the ground where their sister had just been, and then they looked at each other. A second later, a high-pitched wailing started coming from the ground. It was Megan, and she sounded like she was 5 years old instead of 12. She was bawling her eyes out and screaming for help. Jason and I stepped out from behind the bushes and walked slowly toward the hole. We looked down, and there, she was huddled at the bottom of our 4-foot pit. She wasn't hurt because the bottom was soft dirt, but she was covered in dust and dead leaves, and she was absolutely terrified. Her siblings saw us and immediately ran away back toward their house because they were cowards without their leader to protect them. We stood at the edge of the hole looking down at her, and for the first time in my life, I felt like I had the upper hand. I am not going to lie and say we were the bigger people in that moment. We spent the next 30 minutes making fun of her and telling her exactly what we thought of her. I looked her right in the eye and told her she was a nasty piece of work and an idiot for thinking that anyone was actually afraid of her. I told her that she was just a big bully who used her size to make herself feel important, but now she was the one at the bottom of a hole while we were the ones looking down. Megan was crying so hard she was hiccuping, and she kept begging us to help her out. She promised she would never throw another rock or call us another name if we just let her go. I told her we should just leave her there overnight so she could think about all the times she had made us cry. I told her that maybe the local skunks would come by and keep her company. The look of pure panic on her face was something I will never forget. It was like she finally realized that her actions had consequences and that she wasn't as untouchable as she thought. After we had our fill of watching her squirm, We went and found a sturdy wooden stool that someone had discarded near the edge of the lot. We brought it over and lowered it into the hole so she could climb out. She scrambled out of that pit faster than a squirrel climbing a tree, and she didn't even look at us as she bolted for her house. She was covered in dirt and shame, and she didn't say a single word. After she was gone, Jason and I spent an hour filling the hole back in because we didn't want anyone else to fall in, and we didn't want our parents to find out what we had done. We packed the dirt down hard and smoothed it over until the ground looked normal again. The next day at the bus stop was the real test. We waited for the insults and the rocks, but they never came. Megan was standing there with her siblings, and she looked at the ground the entire time. When we got on the bus, she moved to the very back and didn't say a word to anyone. It was like the fire had been completely put out of her. For the rest of the summer, we had the empty lot all to ourselves. We built the biggest ramps we had ever seen, and we rode our bikes until the sun went down every single night without a single rock being thrown our way. Whenever we crossed paths with Megan at school or in the neighborhood, she would steer clear of us like we were the ones who were dangerous. She actually started being a lot nicer to people in general after that incident. I guess being trapped in a dark hole while the people you have been hurting tell you the truth about yourself changes your perspective on how much you can get away with. It was a lesson in humility that she desperately needed. Looking back on it now 20 years later, I am still living in Springfield, although the neighborhood has changed, and that empty lot is now covered in beautiful modern houses with manicured lawns and paved driveways. The giant dirt piles are gone, and the wild bushes have been replaced by fences and flower beds. But every time I drive past that street, I can't help but smile when I look at the spot where the hole used to be. I wonder if Megan still lives around here, and if she ever thinks about that day. I honestly hope she still doesn't trust the ground when she walks over a pile of leaves or a patch of long grass. I learned a lot that summer about standing up for myself and about the power of a good plan. Some people might say it was mean to trap a girl in a hole, but I think it was the most important lesson she ever learned. In the world of neighborhood politics, sometimes you have to dig deep to find a solution to your problems. My eye healed up just fine, and the scar is barely visible, but the memory of Megan falling into that pit is as clear as a bell. It was the summer I stopped being a victim and started being the queen of my own kingdom again. My brother Jason and I still talk about it sometimes when we get together for the holidays, and we always laugh about how high she jumped when she realized the ground wasn't solid. It is a reminder that no matter how big a bully is, they are always vulnerable to someone who is willing to put in the work to take them down. We didn't need to be mean like her, we just needed to show her what it felt like to be helpless. After that day, the neighborhood was a different place, and the air felt a little lighter, and the sun felt a little brighter. We filled that hole with dirt, but we also filled it with all the fear and anger she had given us over the years, and we buried it deep where it could never hurt us again. That is the thing about revenge. When it is done right, it doesn't just hurt the other person, it heals the one who was hurt. I am a grown woman now with a job and a family of my own, but there is still a part of me that is that 9-year-old girl on a BMX bike, feeling the wind in her hair, and knowing that she is safe. I hope Megan found peace, and I hope she is a better person now, but most of all I hope she remembers that you should never mess around with people unless you are prepared to find out exactly what they are capable of doing when they have had enough. It was the ultimate lesson in messing around and finding out, and I wouldn't change a single thing about how it happened. The dirt lot might be gone, but the story of the hole lives on as a legendary piece of our family history and a reminder that sometimes the best way to deal with a bully is to let them fall into a trap of their own making. Even now, when I see a pile of leaves in my own yard, I give it a little poke with my foot just to make sure the ground is solid, because you never know who might be waiting for their turn to take back their kingdom. Springfield is a big city, but the lessons you learn in a small dirt lot stay with you forever. My brother and I are still close, and he always says that was the moment he realized I was going to be just fine in life, because I have the heart of a fighter and the mind of a strategist. We were just two kids in the 90s trying to survive the neighborhood, but we ended up creating a memory that will last a lifetime. So here is to the empty lots and the bike ramps and the lessons learned in the dark. May all the bullies of the world find a hole waiting for them, and may all the kids with black eyes find the courage to dig. It was a long time ago, but the feeling of victory is still as sweet as a cold soda on a hot July afternoon. I am Samantha, and that was the time I took back my world one shovelful of dirt at a time, and I have never looked back since that day when the ground opened up and swallowed the neighborhood monster whole. Everything changed after that, and for the first time, I felt like I could breathe without looking over my shoulder, and that is a feeling that is worth all the blisters and all the sweat in the world. I hope this story serves as a reminder to anyone being picked on that you have more power than you think, and sometimes all you need is a little bit of dirt and a lot of patience to change your life for the better. The world is a big place, but it is the small victories that truly matter, and the one I won in that dirt lot was the biggest victory of all. I can still hear the sound of the dirt hitting the bottom of that pit, and the way the air felt when the screaming started, and it is a sound that brings me peace every single time I think about it. We were just kids, but we were heroes in our own way, and we proved that you don't have to be big to be powerful. That is my story, and I am sticking to it, because every word is the absolute truth of how a 9-year-old girl in Springfield, Illinois, became the master of her own destiny. There is a certain kind of magic in the dirt of the Midwest, and that summer we found every bit of it. I wouldn't trade that experience for anything in the world, because it made me who I am today. Stronger, smarter, and always careful where I step when the grass looks a little too perfect. Because I know better than anyone that sometimes the ground isn't as solid as it looks, and sometimes that is exactly what a bully deserves. Mess around and find out, Megan. Wherever you are, I hope you're walking on solid ground these days. But I also hope you never forget the girl who taught you that the world doesn't belong to you just because you are the loudest person in the room. It belongs to the ones who are willing to dig for their freedom. And that is exactly what we did. We dug, and we waited, and we won. The end of the story is just the beginning of a life lived without fear, and that is the best revenge anyone could ever ask for. I hope everyone listening knows that they have that same power inside them to change their situation and to stand up against the people who try to pull them down. Just remember to bring a shovel and a good friend, because everything is easier when you don't have to do it alone. My brother was my rock, and together we were unstoppable. We turned a place of fear into a place of joy, and that is the true meaning of winning. I will always be grateful for that empty lot, and even for Megan, because without her, I might never have learned how strong I really am. But mostly I am grateful for the whole because it was the perfect solution to a problem that seemed impossible to solve. It was simple, and it was effective, and it changed everything. And that is all you can really ask for in a revenge story. A happy ending for the good guys and a very long fall for the bad guys. It was beautiful, and it was poetic, and it was all ours. I hope you enjoyed hearing about my childhood victory as much as I enjoyed living it. It is a story I will tell my own children one day to remind them that they should always be kind, but they should also never let anyone walk all over them, because you never know when someone might be digging a hole just for you. Keep your head up and your eyes open, and always remember that the best way to deal with a bully is to outsmart them. That is the Springfield way, and it is the only way I know. Thank you for listening to my story of the hole, and the girl who fell into it, and the girl who finally found her voice in the middle of a dirt lot in Illinois. It was the summer that changed everything, and I will never forget it as long as I live. The memory is etched into my mind like a drawing in the sand, and it brings me joy every single time I think about that look on Megan's face when she realized she was trapped. It was the look of a bully who had finally met her match, and it was the most beautiful thing I have ever seen. So stay safe out there and watch your step, because you never know what might be hiding under the leaves and the weeds. It might just be the best thing that ever happened to you, or it might be the worst thing that ever happened to your nemesis. Either way, it is a story worth telling. And that is the absolute truth.